r/explainlikeimfive. Yukimitsu says, explain like I'm 5. How do professors detect that ChatGPT or plagiarism has been used in papers and homework? For context, I graduated from university years ago, before the popularity of ChatGPT. The most that we had was Turnitin, which I believe runs your paper against sources on the internet. I've been reading some tweets from professors talking about how they are just a sentient ChatGPT usage detector. My question is, how can they tell? Is it a certain way that it's written? Can they only tell if it's an entire chunk that was copied off of a ChatGPT answer? Outside Person 5 says, anytime who has played with GPT much notices that it has a truly distinctive style and you can almost instantly recognize it. Like how you can instantly spot AI art. I'm sure that'll change in a few years, but right now it's trivial to spot AI writing. SV650 Rider says, usually, the instructor has enough of a sense of how a student actually writes. So when they hand in something from AI, there's a distinct difference. Trout Mask Duplica says, I mean, you can tell just by looking at it. It has a pretty distinct writing style. But there are software bots that will also detect it. Vito1221 says, my daughter had to submit stories/writing samples to all of her profs in grad school. Each had to be handwritten, in class, no heads up. Anyone using ChatGPT or any type of AI would not be able to hide it from their profs. Hexroy says, training AI on AI papers versus human written papers. Pretty soon you'll have an AI that can tell AI written papers from the rest. Pickles55 says, ChatGPT is a very confident bullshit artist who doesn't actually know the material and is using whatever they can skim from the internet to patch together an answer that seems to make sense to someone who isn't actually familiar with the subject matter. Basically, it's good enough to fool someone who doesn't know what you're supposed to be talking about, but to a subject matter expert it reads like nonsense. It also frequently screws up and uses fake information because it doesn't understand sarcasm and it has no concept of objective truth. It's like if you typed your research prompt into the Google search bar and just combined everything from the first page of results into a paper without any viewpoint or understanding. r/explainlikeimfive. Gorms1328 says, explain like I'm 5. How exactly does climate change make hurricanes stronger? Explain like I'm 5. I know that these most recent severe storms and disasters are undoubtedly a result of worsening climate change, but as a non-science person I don't understand exactly how/why. Jadred says, greenhouse gases like carbon dioxide and methane floating around the atmosphere act like a blanket around the earth, trapping more heat in the atmosphere. Heat in the atmosphere is the energy that powers all of our weather. The more heat there is, the more energy there is to generate wind and evaporation, leading to bigger and more powerful storms and hurricanes. Emu 1981 says, climate change means that the oceans are getting warmer. Over the past 123 years the average surface temperature of the oceans has increased by an average of 0.19 F/0.078 C per decade. Warm water is the fuel that powers hurricanes. The warmer the water, the faster the hurricane can fuel itself up. The surface temperature of the Gulf of Mexico has increased by 1 C over the past 50 years, and this year that surface temperature is at a record high. This is why Hurricane Helene had so much water to dump over land, and why Hurricane Milton was supercharged so quickly from a tropical storm to a Category 5 hurricane. Capital Phil 4 says, slightly more in-depth answer I recently read about, while warm surface water fuels hurricanes, as others have said, cooler deeper water caps that ceiling. With climate change, the deeper water isn't as cool as it used to be, so there is less of a limit to the hurricane's strength. The fuel isn't just stronger, but there's more of it, so to speak. r/explainlikeimfive. Mystery Conch says, Explain like I'm 5. Why do police cars have certified speedometers while civilian cars do not? Bobbit27 says, the speedometer in cars sold to the general public are calibrated according to specific regulations, so they are not just showing any old number, they do have to meet certain specifications. Generally, though, the regulations are that they can overread by a certain amount, but they must never underread. It is safer if you think you are driving at 70 miles per hour, but you are actually driving at 65, than if you think you are driving at 65, but are actually doing 70. For police cars, they actually need an accurate measure of the speed, so the speedometers are calibrated and certified. If a policeman pulled you over for speeding because his speedometer reads 75 when it was legal to do 70, but you were actually doing 68, that would be a problem. Scalian says, as others have said to be reliable for speed checks by the police, but I also wanted to add that civilians' car speedometer always show a higher speed than they are actually going. Not sure about the US laws, but it might be up to 10% plus 3 higher what is shown than the actual speed. Consistent B3478 says, because to be certified you have to use a specific diameter of car tire. That's the actual reason normal speedos show higher than real speed, so they won't ever show lower than real speed when you put on larger tires. Additionally, the tires can't be round-bulled when certified, because that also changes their diameter. And for obvious reason the car uses the spinning of tires to determine speed. But to be fully correct it needs to know the exact diameter of the car. Since you never need accurate speeds, you only need to know, when your car says 70, that you aren't in reality driving 75. There's no reason to incur the extra costs and limitations. r/explain like im5. Terrible opinion 279 says, explain like I'm 5. What did I come into this room for again? Why do these occurrences become more frequent as you age? And what causes it? I never remember being young and having the issues, but boy do I get them a lot now. I'll forget on the way and pray I remember when I get there. Thesno Mexico says, happens to this middle-aged redditor regularly. I say aloud what I'm going in the room to get to help me remember. Sunglasses, for example. It seems to help me. Some garbage 292,343,882 says, I keep seeing people talk about this happening as they age, but I think I've always been like this. Harsboss 123 says, sometimes when I'm scrolling through Reddit, I'll think of or remember something interesting I want to look into, completely unrelated to what I'm seeing in the app. The thought would just pop into my head. I keep scrolling a little, and I can't remember what it was I wanted to look up, so I scroll back up around the post I was looking at when the thought hit me, and I remember what I forgot. Old School Red says, it's called an event boundary, partially compartmented memories in the brain and partly looking for danger in new surroundings. Jtho78 says, the doorway effect. Imagine you're playing with your toys in one room, and you really want to get your favorite teddy bear from another room. You know what you're doing, but as soon as you walk through the door, sometimes you forget what you were thinking about. This happens because your brain gets a little mixed up when you cross from one room to another. It's like your brain is saying, hey, I'm in a new place now, so let's think about new things. So, you might forget about your teddy bear for a moment. Scientists say this is because our memories are like stories that are connected to where we are. When we go to a new place, it's like starting a new story, and sometimes we lose track of the last one we were just in. That's why after going through a door, you might need to think a bit before you remember what you wanted to do. I believe this is also the reason why some a-holes stop walking right outside of an exit to look for their car or at their phone for what to do next. r/explain like im5. Hoy says, Explain like I'm 5. Why did early Korean war jets carry big bulbous tanks on the tips of their wings, like the F-2H Banshee or F-84 thunderjet? How do modern jets manage with higher performance engines? Like, why not carry them slung under the wings like bombs? Firebomb tanks have similar shapes and those were slung under the wings. And from what I've seen of public modern fighter jets, they carry their drop tanks under their wings like a bomb. Fiendish Rabbit says, the thin wings and slim bodies of early jet fighters meant that they couldn't carry a lot of fuel inside their wings or fuselage. So they had wingtip fuel tanks, which also helped with reducing drag from wingtip vortices. They stopped with it because as jets got faster and more maneuverable, it put an unacceptable strain on the wings. Instead, wings got thicker and shorter, with more room for fuel, and the internal fuel tank structure got a lot more complicated. Not super complicated in early successes like the F-4 Phantom, which has very big fuel tanks stretching all along the aircraft's belly, but F-14/F-15/F-16/F-18 have a whole bunch of internal fuel tanks trying to utilize every space inside the aircraft hull. The F-16 has 7 different fuel tanks, for example. 2 in the wings, and then 5 inside the fuselage. Red Cop says, some of them turned out to fly better with wingtip tanks in place. The tanks acted sort of similar to the winglets you see on modern airliners to reduce wingtip vortices. So if you're going to put a big tank somewhere, might as well put it where it is aerodynamically beneficial. Some modern fighter jets mount missiles there for the same reason. Also, this might seem counterintuitive, but mounting a heavy weight at the wingtips could reduce the stress on wing spurs. The wings lift the whole weight of the fuselage, so if you add heavy tanks closer to the center line, that puts additional bending moment on the wings. Putting the heavy tanks near or at the wingtips helps distribute the load and reduce wing bending moment. That's all for this video. Thank you for watching. Please subscribe.